What if refusing $50 from desperate strangers could make you a millionaire overnight? This is Miguel Santos, 25 years old, driving a broken-down taxi through the coldest night of winter. He can barely afford his grandmother's insulin, sleeps on a mattress he's had for 7 years, and has only $3 in his pocket for tomorrow's gas. In exactly 17 minutes, he will make a choice that transforms everything. The elderly white couple shivering in front of the taxi, showing only the little they had, begging for mercy they cannot afford. What Miguel doesn't know is that the old gentleman controls a $200 million foundation, and this entire desperate situation has been carefully orchestrated for the past 72 hours. The woman's shaking hands clutch documents that will soon bear Miguel's signature. Her leather portfolio contains architectural blueprints for a transportation empire worth more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But here's what makes this story absolutely extraordinary. Miguel Santos has no idea he's driving two of the most powerful philanthropists in America. He sees only what his grandmother taught him to see: two human beings who need help. One choice, two billionaires in disguise, a reward beyond imagination. But let me take you back to where this all began, because to understand why what happens next defies every expectation, you need to witness what Miguel's life was really like before destiny knocked on his taxi door. 3:47 a.m. The alarm beside Miguel's narrow bed doesn't work anymore, hasn't for 6 months, but his body knows when poverty demands consciousness. He rolls from the mattress he's slept on since his 18th birthday, the same mattress his grandmother, Doña Carmen, bought him with her first Social Security check. The apartment on Riverside Avenue tells its story in whispered Spanish and creaking floorboards. Paint peels like old skin from walls that have absorbed decades of dreams deferred and prayers answered just enough to survive another day. Through the paper-thin wall, he hears it. The wheeze of Doña Carmen's labored breathing, the soft rattle that reminds him why every dollar matters, why every fare counts, why sleep is a luxury reserved for people who can afford tomorrow's uncertainty. She's 78 years old and weighs barely 90 pounds, her body consumed by diabetes that devours insulin faster than Miguel can afford to buy it. But she pretends to sleep because she knows Miguel worries, and worry is a weight she refuses to add to shoulders already bent beneath the burden of caring for them both. Miguel pulls on the same jeans he wore yesterday, checks his pockets for loose change. $3.47, enough for 2 gallons of gas, not enough to fill the tank, but enough to get his taxi through another shift if he's careful, if he's lucky, if desperation continues to fuel his determination. The walk to Hernandez's taxi depot takes him past buildings that lean against each other like exhausted workers, past convenience stores protected by bulletproof glass, past the dreams of his childhood when he believed hard work guaranteed success. Carlos Hernandez owns 12 taxis, all of them older than Miguel, all of them held together by prayer and automotive stubbornness. Miguel's taxi, number 7, is a 2003 Ford Crown Victoria with over 300,000 miles, transmission issues, and a heater that works only when the outside temperature exceeds 70 degrees. But it runs, and running is enough when you're trying to survive. Every morning Miguel performs the same ritual: check the oil, test the brakes, count his starting cash. $12. His share of yesterday's earnings after Carlos takes his 60% cut for the privilege of driving a car that should have been retired when Obama was president. $12 to purchase hope, one fare at a time. The radio crackles with dispatcher calls. Miguel knows the voices, recognizes the desperation masked as professionalism. Airport run, $25 plus tip if the passenger feels generous. Medical appointment, $15 for delivering someone to news they probably don't want to hear. Grocery store pickup, $8 for transporting weekly sustenance that will disappear in 3 days. But Miguel notices things other drivers miss. The way elderly passengers count change before getting in his taxi, calculating whether they can afford both the ride and their medication. The way single mothers negotiate payment plans for school pickup runs. The way dignity struggles against necessity in the back seat of his worn-out Crown Victoria. At home, Doña Carmen waits with coffee that tastes like hope and smells like sacrifice. She was once the finest seamstress in 3 neighborhoods, her hands creating beauty from fabric and thread. Now, those same hands shake when she tries to pour sugar, when she attempts to hide the insulin vials she's been rationing because the prescription costs more than Miguel makes in a week. "Mijo," she says every morning, using the Spanish endearment that means my son and my heart simultaneously. "How was your night?" "Good, Abuela." "Yours?" "Better now that you're home." They don't discuss the medical bills accumulating like snow in winter. They don't mention the electricity notice threatening disconnection. They don't acknowledge the college applications Miguel filled out 3 years ago, still hidden beneath his mattress like burial documents for dreams he cannot afford to resurrect. Some conversations are too heavy for morning coffee and grandmother love, but this morning is different. This morning, Miguel will encounter passengers who will change everything he believes about chance, about character, about the invisible threads that connect human hearts across the artificial boundaries of wealth and poverty. He just doesn't know it yet. What he also cannot possibly know is that for the past 3 days, someone has been asking questions about the young taxi driver who waits in hospital parking lots to help elderly patients with heavy bags, who refuses tips from passengers counting food stamps, who gives directions in 3 languages and somehow makes everyone feel less alone in the backseat of taxi number 7. Someone who's about to put Miguel's character to the ultimate test. November rain in this part of the city doesn't just fall, it hunts. Tonight, it attacks Miguel's windshield like bullets of ice, transforming familiar streets into rivers of uncertainty. His wipers barely function, one blade missing half its rubber, the other streaking water in patterns that make visibility a prayer answered inconsistently. But Miguel drives through worse than rain. He drives through the storm of financial desperation that never ends, never relents, never offers safe harbor. The radio crackles at 11:37 p.m. Unit 7, pick up at Memorial Hospital, emergency exit, elderly couple, cash payment. Miguel's heart accelerates. Emergency exit. That means medical crisis, which usually means people too scared to worry about money, too grateful for help to negotiate fares. Not that Miguel would take advantage, but desperate passengers sometimes tip better than convenience store runs. Unit 7 responding. Miguel keys the radio, turning onto Hospital Boulevard, where streetlights fight losing battles against rain and darkness. Memorial Hospital squats against the storm like a fortress of fluorescent hope. The emergency exit glows with the harsh light of human crisis. Ambulances parked like sleeping beasts, their crews grabbing coffee between calls that determine whether families celebrate survival or schedule funerals. Miguel's taxi idles near the pickup zone, engine struggling against the cold, heater producing more noise than warmth. And then he sees them. 2 figures emerge from the automatic doors, moving with the careful steps of people whose bodies have betrayed their spirits. An elderly white couple, both soaked to the bone, despite the brief distance between hospital exit and Miguel's taxi. The woman clutches a worn leather portfolio against her chest like armor. The man moves with the deliberate precision of someone fighting pain with dignity. Even through rain-streaked windows, Miguel can see their expensive clothes. The woman's coat, despite being waterlogged, carries the unmistakable elegance of serious money. The man's suit, though wrinkled and damp, fits with the perfection of custom tailoring. These are people accustomed to Lincoln-town cars and private drivers, not broken-down taxis driven by young men who count change before buying coffee. They slide into Miguel's backseat with grateful exhaustion. The woman's silver hair drips steadily onto leather seats that have seen better decades. Her husband sits ramrod straight despite obvious discomfort, but his expensive suit clings to him like newspaper in wind. "Where to?" Miguel asks gently, adjusting his rearview mirror to see their faces clearly. 1247 Oak Ridge Drive, the man replies, his voice carrying decades of authority even in distress. Please hurry. My wife, she's not feeling well. Miguel knows Oak Ridge Drive, mansions behind iron gates, circular driveways that cost more than most people's cars, the kind of neighborhood where taxi drivers receive directions to service entrances rather than front doors. The fare will be at least $40, maybe $50 with tip, enough to buy Doña Carmen's insulin and put gas in the tank for tomorrow's shift. But as Miguel navigates through storm-flooded streets, something feels different about these passengers. They whisper to each other in urgent tones, not the casual conversation of wealthy people accustomed to hired transportation. The woman opens her purse repeatedly, searching with increasing desperation. Her husband pats down his coat pockets, then his pants, then returns to his coat with mounting anxiety. Margaret, the man says quietly, do you have the wallet? I thought you had it, Harold. I checked. It's not in my coat. Maybe it fell out in the hospital with all the commotion. Miguel catches fragments of their story through whispered conversation. Harold, the man, had experienced chest pains during dinner at the country club. Margaret, his wife, had insisted on the emergency room. Tests, waiting, hours of uncertainty, while doctors performed procedures that ruled out heart attack but confirmed exhaustion. Stress, the physical toll of carrying responsibilities too heavy for aging shoulders. But they left the hospital without their wallet. Somewhere between registration and discharge, between insurance paperwork and prescription instructions, the leather billfold containing their cash, credit cards, and identification had vanished into the chaos of medical bureaucracy. Sir, Miguel says, glancing in the rearview mirror as they approach Oak Ridge Drive, I hate to ask, but do you have the fare? It's $42. The silence that follows carries weight. Margaret opens her purse one final time, dumping contents onto the seat between them. Tissues, reading glasses, breath mints, prescription bottles, but no money, no credit cards, nothing. Harold checks his pockets again, more desperately this time, pulling out an antique gold pocket watch, a handkerchief, keys to cars he cannot currently afford to drive. I'm so embarrassed, Margaret says, her voice breaking slightly. This has never happened before. We don't usually... Harold's pale blue eyes meet Miguel's in the mirror. For just a moment, something flickers there. Not panic, but calculation, as if he's evaluating Miguel's response to their predicament. Son, I understand this puts you in a difficult position. Perhaps we could arrange payment tomorrow. I could give you my watch as collateral. Miguel looks at the antique timepiece Harold offers. Even his untrained eye recognizes quality, suspects the watch is worth more than his taxi. These are obviously people of means, caught in temporary circumstances. Taking collateral would be smart business, practical thinking, the choice 99% of drivers would make without hesitation. But Miguel doesn't see a business transaction. He sees Doña Carmen's face, in Margaret's worried expression. He hears his grandmother's breathing problems in Harold's labored exhalations. He remembers every time strangers showed unexpected kindness when pride collided with necessity. Keep your watch, sir, Miguel says quietly, pulling into their circular driveway. And keep your money for tomorrow. Some rides are more important than payment. The silence that follows is profound. Margaret's hand covers her mouth, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. Harold's penetrating blue eyes study Miguel's face in the mirror with new intensity, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Son, Harold says carefully, you just gave up $42 to strangers, money you clearly need. Miguel shrugs, though his hands shake slightly as he realizes what he's just sacrificed. $42 represents 2 days of Doña Carmen's medication, or gas money for the rest of the week, or groceries to replace the empty refrigerator at home. But looking at this elderly couple's grateful faces, the choice feels inevitable, necessary, right? My grandmother taught me that kindness is the only investment that always pays dividends, Miguel explains. Sometimes not immediately, but eventually, always eventually. What Miguel cannot see is Harold's subtle smile in the darkness. What he doesn't notice is Margaret carefully writing notes in a small leather journal. What he cannot possibly know is that this entire situation, from the lost wallet to the emergency hospital visit, has been meticulously planned for the past 72 hours. As Miguel helps them to their front door, Harold pauses on his mansion's steps. "Son, what's your full name?" "Miguel Santos." "And your address?" The question seems oddly formal for a grateful passenger, but Miguel provides it anyway. 1247 Riverside Avenue, apartment 3B. Harold nods, as if confirming information he already possesses. "Miguel Santos," he repeats, testing how the name sounds with his authoritative pronunciation. "You've shown us something rare tonight, something precious." Margaret steps forward, still clutching her mysterious portfolio. "Miguel, what you did tonight means more than you realize, more than you can possibly imagine. It was just a taxi ride," corrects firmly. Miguel protests. "Pure, unselfish character, the kind that's rarer than diamonds and more valuable than gold." As they disappear behind their mansion's heavy oak door, Miguel sits in his idling taxi, staring at his reflection in rain-streaked windows. Something extraordinary just happened, but he cannot quite identify what. Something beyond kindness exchanged between strangers, something that felt like the beginning of a story rather than its conclusion. What Miguel doesn't know, what he cannot possibly suspect, is that Harold is already reaching for his phone to make calls that will change everything. The first call goes to his assistant. "Cancel my morning meetings. I need complete background checks, financial records and character references for Miguel Santos, 1247 Riverside Avenue." The second call reaches his lawyer. "Draft the paperwork we discussed. I believe we've found our candidate." The third call will happen at exactly 9 a.m. tomorrow morning to the director of the Whitmore Foundation's Transportation Initiative. But for now, Miguel just drives through empty streets, wondering why giving away $42 he desperately needed feels like the most profitable transaction of his life. Dawn arrives grey and unforgiving, but Miguel's routine remains unchanged. Coffee with Doña Carmen, who doesn't ask why there's no grocery money this morning. Radio calls from the dispatcher, seeking drivers for fares that barely cover gas expenses. The same tired streets, the same broken dreams, the same daily calculation of survival versus dignity. But something is different. Throughout his morning shift, Miguel notices people staring, not with the usual indifference reserved for taxi drivers, but with curiosity, as if they recognize him from somewhere but cannot place the memory. At the hospital, where he often waits for medical transport fares, nurses whisper and point. At the grocery store, where he picks up elderly customers counting coupons, cashiers pause their scanning to study his face. "Hey," calls Rosa, the checkout clerk at Martinez Market. "Aren't you the guy from the news?" "What news?" Miguel asks, confused. Channel 7 ran a story about some foundation in town looking for community leaders. They interviewed people about local heroes, and your name came up like 6 times. Miguel's confusion deepens. He's never contacted any news station, never applied for recognition, never sought attention beyond the gratitude of satisfied passengers. But throughout the day, the whispers continue, the stares multiply, the sense that something significant is building toward an inevitable conclusion. At 3 p.m., Miguel's radio crackles with an unusual request. "Unit 7, special pickup at 1247 Riverside Avenue. VIP passengers requesting you specifically." Miguel's heart stops. That's his address. Someone is requesting pickup at his own apartment building, asking for him by name. He's never received a personal request before, never had passengers who knew his identity before entering his taxi. "Unit 7 responding," he radios back, though his voice carries uncertainty instead of confidence. The black Lincoln Town car parked outside Miguel's apartment building doesn't belong to his neighborhood. Neither do the 2 figures standing beside it, dressed in expensive business attire, consulting documents in a leather portfolio that looks familiar but impossible to place. As Miguel's taxi approaches, the figures turn toward him with expressions of professional satisfaction. Harold and Margaret, but not the desperate, rain-soaked elderly couple from last night. These are people who command boardrooms, who make decisions affecting thousands of lives, who carry themselves with the absolute confidence of individuals accustomed to shaping reality according to their vision. "Miguel Santos?" Harold calls out as Miguel exits his taxi, legs suddenly unsteady. "Yes, sir, but you're the folks from last night. What are you doing here?" Margaret steps forward, no longer clutching her portfolio defensively, but holding it with the authority of someone about to present life-changing information. "We're here because of what you did last night, because of who you chose to be when you thought no one important was watching." Harold's pale blue eyes fix on Miguel with laser intensity. "Son, we need to talk, and I think you're going to want to sit down for this conversation." They move to Miguel's apartment, where Doña Carmen greets the unexpected visitors with the gracious dignity she reserves for special occasions. She serves coffee in her best cups, the ones saved for Christmas and funerals, while Miguel tries to process the impossibility of Harold and Margaret's presence in his humble living room. "Miguel," Harold begins, settling into Doña Carmen's worn but clean sofa. "Last night wasn't an accident. We've been in this city for 3 days, conducting research, asking questions, observing behavior. Your name came up repeatedly as someone who embodies the values we're seeking." "I don't understand," Miguel says, though part of him is beginning to suspect something extraordinary is approaching. Margaret opens her leather portfolio, revealing documents that make Miguel's breath catch. Official letterheads, architectural blueprints, financial statements with numbers containing too many zeros to process immediately. "We're not just wealthy people who got caught in the rain," Margaret explains carefully. "We're Harold and Margaret Whitmore, founders of the Whitmore Foundation. Our organization has assets of over $200 million, dedicated to community development and transportation equity." Miguel blinks rapidly, trying to reconcile the desperate passengers from last night with the powerful philanthropists sitting in his grandmother's living room. "You lied to me." "We created a scenario," Harold corrects. "We needed to see authentic character, behavior that couldn't be performed or calculated for benefit. We needed to witness who you really are when faced with a choice between personal need and stranger compassion." "The lost wallet?" Miguel asks weakly. Margaret pats her purse. "Safe the entire time." "The chest pains?" "Staged," Harold admits, "though my blood pressure certainly elevated while waiting to see how you'd respond to our situation." The betrayal hits Miguel like physical pain. The kindness he'd shown, the sacrifice he'd made, all based on deception. "Why?" he whispers. Harold leans forward, his expression serious. "Miguel, we fund transportation initiatives in underserved communities across America. But we've learned that sustainable change requires local leadership, people who understand the real struggles because they've lived them, people whose character we can trust absolutely." Margaret continues, consulting her documents. "We've spent 6 months researching this city, identifying individuals who consistently demonstrate selfless service. Your name appeared in every conversation. The taxi driver who waits for elderly passengers to safely enter buildings, who helps with grocery bags without being asked, who gives directions in 3 languages and somehow makes everyone feel dignified. For the past 72 hours, Harold adds, we've been conducting final evaluations, character assessments designed to confirm what we already suspected about your integrity." Doña Carmen, who has been listening quietly from her chair, speaks for the first time. "Mijo, I think these people want to offer you something important." Harold smiles at the elderly woman with genuine respect. "Señora Santos, your grandson is about to receive an offer that will transform his life and the lives of everyone he touches." Margaret spreads architectural blueprints across Miguel's small coffee table, detailed plans for a gleaming facility that looks like something from a magazine. "The Miguel Santos Transportation Center," she announces, pointing to elegant lettering across the building's facade. Miguel stares at the blueprints, his mind struggling to process what he's seeing. "You want to name something after me?" We want you to build it, Harold clarifies. This represents a $15 million investment in transportation equity for your community. But we don't just write checks and disappear. We partner with local leaders who share our vision. The numbers are impossible. $15 million. More money than everyone in Miguel's apartment building has seen combined. More money than exists in Miguel's understanding of financial reality. Here's what we're proposing, Margaret begins, consulting official documents. A comprehensive transportation solution for underserved communities, affordable taxi services, medical transport, job interview shuttles, grocery delivery for elderly residents who cannot drive. Harold points to different sections of the blueprints. The ground floor houses dispatch operations and vehicle maintenance. The second floor contains driver training facilities, English language classes, and small business development programs. The third floor provides affordable housing for drivers building financial stability. Miguel's hands shake as he examines the plans. Everything his community needs, rendered in precise architectural detail and backed by resources beyond imagination. Why me? Miguel asks quietly. You're a taxi driver who refused payment from strangers because kindness mattered more than money, Harold replies firmly. That single choice revealed more about your character than a decade of interviews could accomplish. Margaret nods. Authentic change requires authentic leadership. We can provide resources, but transformation has to come from within the community. It has to come from someone who genuinely loves their neighbors despite their struggles. Harold pulls out official contracts, documents that make this extraordinary conversation suddenly impossibly real. Here's our specific offer, Miguel. Full funding for 2 years of business management training at the university of your choice. During summers, you'll work directly with our foundation team, learning non-profit administration, community development, and transportation logistics. Margaret continues, after graduation, you return here as assistant director, working alongside our established team to build the Santos Transportation Center. Starting salary, $65,000 annually, plus comprehensive health care for you and your grandmother. The salary figure hits Miguel like electricity, $65,000. More than Doña Carmen earned in her best years as a seamstress. More than Miguel imagined possible for someone without college education or business experience. But that's just the beginning, Harold adds, consulting additional documents. After 2 years as assistant director, assuming mutual satisfaction, you become director with full operational authority. Salary increases to $90,000 plus performance bonuses, management of a 50-person team, oversight of a $2 million annual budget. Miguel looks around his tiny apartment, at Doña Carmen's worn furniture, at the medical bills stacked on their kitchen table, at the life of financial struggle that has defined his existence since childhood. This is impossible, he whispers. This is character rewarded, Margaret corrects gently. This is what happens when good people receive adequate resources to multiply their impact. Harold's expression softens. Miguel, regardless of whether you accept our partnership offer, certain things are immediate and non-negotiable. Your grandmother's medical care is now fully covered. Her insulin, doctor visits, prescriptions, everything. That begins today. Doña Carmen gasps, her weathered hands covering her mouth as tears flow freely. Additionally, Margaret continues, we're purchasing a small fleet of reliable vehicles for you to operate independently while you complete your education. No more renting broken-down taxis, no more splitting fares with dispatchers. Your earnings are your own. But the real opportunity, Harold explains, leaning forward with intensity, is what this means for everyone around you. The Santos Transportation Center will employ 47 people directly, all positions paying living wages with benefits. Driver training programs, maintenance jobs, dispatch operators, customer service representatives. Miguel thinks about Jerome from high school, still unemployed despite technical skills. About Mrs. Rodriguez next door, whose arthritis prevents her from reaching the grocery store. about the countless neighbors who've shared rides in his taxi, counting change and apologizing for destinations they cannot afford. "There's one critical condition," Margaret says, her voice becoming serious. "You cannot accept this offer for personal gain. The moment this becomes about wealth accumulation rather than community service, everything stops working. We've funded hundreds of projects over 20 years, and that principle never fails." Harold nods. Character that deep doesn't shift with circumstances. It only grows stronger with resources. Miguel stares at the contracts, the blueprints, the impossible opportunities spread across his grandmother's coffee table. Everything he's dreamed for his community, rendered in precise legal language and backed by more resources than he knew existed. "What if I'm not ready?" he asks quietly. "What if I fail?" "Then you'll have failed while trying to lift others," Margaret responds. "That's not failure, that's heroism." Harold leans back, studying Miguel's face. "Son, we've evaluated hundreds of potential partners across dozens of cities. We know character when we see it. You possess something most people never develop, the ability to see what could be instead of just what is. Plus," Margaret adds with a smile, "you'll have the full backing of a $200 million foundation. You won't be building this dream alone." Doña Carmen speaks from her chair, her voice steady despite her tears. "Mijo, your parents would be so proud. They raised you to help people, and now you can help everyone." Miguel looks around the room one final time. At Harold and Margaret, whose test of his character has revealed opportunities beyond imagination. At Doña Carmen, whose medical struggles will end today regardless of his decision. At the blueprints, showing a transportation center that could transform every life in his neighborhood. The choice isn't whether he wants this opportunity. The choice is whether he's brave enough to believe he deserves it. "Where do I sign?" Miguel says quietly. The next 18 months pass like a beautiful dream, punctuated by hard work and extraordinary transformation. Miguel, now 27 and completing his final semester of business management, spends spring break overseeing construction of the Santos Transportation Center. The facility rises from abandoned lots, like hope made manifest in steel and glass. Modern architecture blends seamlessly with neighborhood character. Solar panels provide sustainable energy. Accessible design ensures elderly and disabled residents feel welcome. Every detail reflects both professional excellence and community dignity. The medical transport program launches first, addressing the immediate need Miguel witnessed daily in his taxi. Professional drivers, reliable vehicles, affordable rates for elderly residents who previously chose between doctor visits and grocery money. Mrs. Rodriguez schedules her first arthritis appointment in 3 years. Job training programs exceed every projection. 43 residents learn automotive maintenance, developing skills that lead to employment at dealerships across the city. English language classes help immigrant families navigate employment applications with confidence. Small business development workshops guide neighbors through the process of starting cleaning services, catering operations, and home repair companies. But the real transformation happens quietly, in individual moments of dignity restored. Jerome finds full-time employment as head maintenance supervisor, his technical skills finally recognized and compensated fairly. Mrs. Martinez launches a successful catering business using the center's commercial kitchen, employing 6 neighbors and serving contracts throughout the city. Carlos Hernandez expands his taxi operation, purchasing newer vehicles and offering drivers partnership opportunities instead of exploitative rental agreements. Local news coverage attracts state attention. The governor visits for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, praising the Whitmore Foundation's partnership model. The Santos Transportation Center proves that sustainable change requires local leadership supported by strategic investment. We're implementing similar partnerships in 8 additional communities. But Miguel, standing beside Harold and Margaret as television cameras record his remarks, focuses his speech on neighbors who made the vision real. This center exists because Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store believed in community dreams, Because Carlos Hernandez showed faith in a young driver who couldn't afford his own taxi. Because Doña Carmen taught me that kindness multiplies when you share it with others. The applause echoes off modern walls, but Miguel notices Harold wiping his eyes in the back of the crowd. Later, during the private reception, Harold approaches with final documents. Miguel, the center is officially yours now. Full operational control, complete financial authority. The Whitmore Foundation remains available for consultation, but this is your community, your vision, your responsibility. Margaret adds, in 20 years of philanthropy, we've never transferred complete ownership to someone so young. But character doesn't depend on age, and vision doesn't require grey hair. 6 months after opening, the transformation statistics tell an extraordinary story. The Santos Transportation Center serves over 2,000 residents monthly. Medical transport program eliminates healthcare access barriers. Job training initiatives achieve an 87% employment placement rate. Small business development programs launch 19 new enterprises, creating 63 additional jobs throughout the community. Crime drops 23% in the first year, not because of increased security, but because people have better options than desperation. Property values rise as abandoned buildings get renovated by residents who learned construction skills. The neighborhood association meets monthly in the center's conference room, planning community gardens and youth sports leagues. But perhaps the most profound change occurs in Miguel himself. The uncertain young man who once counted change for gasoline now commands respect in city council meetings, where he advocates for transportation equity across all neighborhoods. The former taxi driver, who struggled to afford his grandmother's medication, now manages a $2.3 million annual budget with precision and transparency that impresses foundation auditors. Yet the kindness that caught Harold's attention remains unchanged. Miguel still personally drives elderly residents to medical appointments when regular drivers aren't available. Still helps new immigrants navigate city services. Still treats every center visitor with the dignity he learned from Doña Carmen's example. What nobody could have predicted was how Miguel's story would ripple outward, inspiring similar transformations in other cities. The Whitmore Foundation receives applications from communities nationwide, all seeking partnerships with local leaders who demonstrate character over credentials. Miguel becomes a consulting voice in candidate evaluation, helping identify individuals whose hearts align with resource availability. But the most important lesson emerges 2 years later, when Miguel faces his first major test as director. A crisis that proves character under pressure looks exactly like character under poverty. A harsh winter evening finds Miguel in his office, reviewing applications for the center's newest transportation program. Through his window, he watches children play in the center's heated playground, while their parents attend computer literacy classes. His office walls tell the story of transformation through framed photographs. Groundbreaking ceremony, ribbon cutting, graduation ceremonies for job training programs. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. Rosa Martinez, who now manages the center's small business development program, peers in with familiar nervousness. Miguel, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a family in the lobby. Recent immigrants, their car broke down, and they can't afford taxi fare to their new apartment. I remembered what you always say about helping people, and I thought maybe... Miguel smiles, closing his laptop without hesitation. I'll be right there. The lobby holds a young Hispanic family, parents with 2 small children, huddled together and speaking in worried whispers. Their clothes are travel-worn. Their eyes hold the familiar mixture of hope and desperation that Miguel remembers too well from his own family's struggles. Friends, Miguel says, approaching with genuine warmth. I understand you need transportation help. As he listens to their story, construction work promised by relatives, unexpected car repairs consuming their moving budget, fear of sleeping in their vehicle with young children, Miguel sees his own reflection in their circumstances. The same determination, the same dignity, the same willingness to work hard if given opportunity. Rosa, Miguel calls to his colleague, please arrange temporary housing in our residential program and contact the job placement coordinator about construction opportunities. Within 2 hours, the family is settled in clean, safe accommodations with meals provided and childcare arranged. Miguel personally drives them to view potential apartments, helps them navigate rental applications, and connects the father with a construction crew that needs experienced workers. That evening, Miguel calls Harold to report on the center's quarterly progress. How are things developing, Director Santos? Harold asks, the formal title carrying deep respect. Growing, Miguel replies, watching through his office window as evening classes fill with residents pursuing dreams they couldn't afford before. Really growing. I think I'm starting to understand something you taught me during our first meeting. What's that, son? Kindness is the only investment that always pays dividends. Harold chuckles warmly. And what's your return rate so far? Miguel surveys the thriving center, thinks about Doña Carmen's renewed health, Jerome's stable employment, the 47 jobs created, the 19 businesses launched, the thousands of lives touched by one act of unexpected generosity in a broken-down taxi on a rain-soaked night. Immeasurable, he says softly. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this truth will change how you see every human interaction for the rest of your life. Miguel Santos didn't just refuse payment that stormy night. He proved that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the willingness to sacrifice for strangers. The Whitmore Foundation has tested hundreds of candidates across dozens of cities over 20 years of philanthropic work. Most people, when faced with desperate passengers who couldn't pay their fare, would have demanded payment up front. Some would have left the elderly couple at the hospital entrance, prioritizing business over compassion. Others would have accepted the expensive watch as collateral, calculating profit over human dignity. But Miguel Santos, he saw two human beings in distress, and that vision, that extraordinarily rare gift of perceiving humanity before profit, need before greed, character before convenience, is precisely what transformed him from a struggling taxi driver earning $12 per day into a millionaire non-profit director managing multi-million-dollar community development initiatives. You see, the Whitmore Foundation understands something that most people never learn. Character is the only currency that truly appreciates over time. Every other investment fluctuates with market conditions, economic uncertainty, political changes. But genuine kindness, authentic compassion, selfless service to others, these qualities become more valuable with every passing year, more precious with every human encounter, more powerful with every opportunity to make a difference. Right now, in your own community, someone like Miguel is washing dishes after school, driving night shifts to support elderly relatives, helping neighbors with groceries despite barely affording their own. They're not waiting for permission to make a difference. They're not calculating return on investment before extending helping hands. They're already transforming their corner of the world, one small act of kindness at a time. The Santos Transportation Center now serves over 4,000 residents annually, employs 63 people at living wages, and generates $1.3 million in local economic activity. Miguel's story has inspired similar partnerships in 12 cities, touching over 40,000 lives across America, but none of this would exist without that single moment of choice in a broken-down taxi on a cold November night. What if your next act of kindness could unlock someone's hidden potential? What if a stranger's unexpected generosity could completely redirect your life trajectory? What if the person sitting beside you on the bus, serving your coffee, delivering your packages, cleaning your office building, is actually a future community leader who just needs someone to believe in their character? Here's what I want you to understand about transformation. It doesn't require wealth, education, connections, or luck. It requires only the courage to choose kindness when no one important seems to be watching. Miguel Santos was nobody special by society's standards, a taxi driver with calloused hands and empty pockets. But he possessed something rarer than money, more valuable than gold, the unshakable belief that human dignity matters more than personal profit. I've spent decades observing human nature, studying the invisible forces that separate those who merely survive from those who truly thrive. Do you know what I've discovered? The people who change the world aren't the ones born with advantages. They're the ones who choose character over convenience, again and again, even when, especially when, no one seems to notice. Miguel's grandmother, Doña Carmen, taught him that kindness multiplies when you share it. She was right, but she didn't tell him the whole truth. Kindness doesn't just multiply, it transforms, evolves, becomes something far greater than its original form. A refused taxi fare becomes a medical transport program serving thousands. A moment of compassion towards strangers becomes a community development center employing dozens. A choice to see humanity instead of profit becomes a legacy that will outlive everyone involved. But here's the secret that Harold and Margaret Whitmore learned over 20 years of philanthropy, the truth that guides every decision of their $200 million foundation. You cannot purchase character. You cannot manufacture integrity. You cannot create compassion through financial incentives or professional training. These qualities emerge only from the daily practice of choosing others over self, community over comfort, service over security. This very moment, someone in your city is facing their Miguel Santos test. A cashier counting change for a customer who came up short. A bus driver deciding whether to wait for an elderly passenger struggling with mobility. A restaurant server choosing how to respond to a family who cannot afford their meal. A neighbor witnessing someone who needs help but cannot ask for it. These moments happen thousands of times daily in grocery stores and gas stations, hospitals and schools. Everywhere human need intersects with human choice. Most pass unnoticed, unremarked, forgotten within minutes. But occasionally, very occasionally, someone chooses character over convenience, and the entire trajectory of multiple lives shifts toward possibility. The question isn't whether opportunities for kindness exist around you. They do, constantly, invisibly, waiting for recognition. The question is whether you possess the vision to see them and the courage to act, despite personal cost. Miguel Santos wasn't special because he helped strangers. He was special because he helped strangers when helping hurt, when kindness required sacrifice, when compassion demanded something he couldn't afford to give. So here's my challenge for you, and it will determine whether you're someone who simply consumes stories or someone who creates them. Think about the last time someone showed you unexpected kindness. The teacher who stayed late to help with homework. The neighbor who shoveled your walkway without being asked. The stranger who held an elevator, gave directions, offered assistance when you needed it most. That person didn't help you because they expected reward. They helped because they chose to see your humanity rather than your inconvenience. They invested in your dignity without calculating return. They practiced the same character that caught Harold Whitmore's attention in the backseat of a broken-down taxi. Now multiply that feeling by 4,000, the number of people served annually by Miguel's transportation center. Multiply it by 63, the number of jobs created by one man's choice to refuse payment from strangers. Multiply it by 12 cities where similar partnerships now exist, by 40,000 lives touched by the immeasurable impact of kindness given freely and invested wisely. This is what's possible when character meets opportunity, when authenticity encounters resources, when someone with calloused hands and a generous heart is trusted with the tools to multiply their impact. Miguel Santos proved that transformation doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency, not wealth, but willingness, not credentials, but character. The taxi is still running. The radio is crackling with
Desperate
calls.
passengers are still searching for drivers willing to help despite personal cost. The test is still happening every day in every community to people who don't realize they're being evaluated for opportunities that could change everything. The only question remaining is this. When your moment comes, when strangers need help you can barely afford to give, when kindness costs more than convenience, when no one important seems to be watching, what will you choose? Because somewhere tonight, someone is refusing payment from people who desperately need help and changing the world one heart at a time. The story never ends. It just finds new heroes. But let me tell you about the ripple effects that nobody saw coming, the consequences of kindness that extend far beyond Miguel's neighborhood, far beyond the Santos Transportation Center, into corners of the world where taxi drivers speak different languages, but share the same fundamental choice between profit and humanity. 3 years after the center's grand opening, Miguel receives a phone call that changes his understanding of impact entirely. The voice on the other end speaks with a thick accent, introducing himself as Dr. James Okonkwo, calling from Lagos, Nigeria. Mr. Santos, I hope you don't mind the international call, but I had to reach out personally. I'm a physician here in Lagos, and 6 months ago I watched a video about your transportation center. Your story inspired me to start something similar in my community. Miguel listens with growing amazement as Dr. Okonkwo describes the Lagos Community Transport Initiative, modeled directly on the Santos Center but adapted for Nigerian needs. Motorcycle taxi services for medical emergencies, driver training programs that teach both technical skills and basic medical response, a microcredit program helping drivers purchase their own vehicles and build small businesses. But here's what I really called to tell you, Dr. Okonkwo continues, his excitement audible across continents. Last month, one of our trained drivers, a young man named Chidi, encountered an elderly woman who couldn't afford transport to the hospital. She was in labor, her first grandchild, but she had no money. Chidi not only refused payment, he stayed with the family throughout the birth, helped with translation at the hospital, even used his own money to buy baby supplies. Miguel's heart races as he recognizes the pattern, the echo of his own choice reverberating across oceans and cultures. The woman's son-in-law, it turns out, is a member of Nigeria's National Assembly. He was so moved by Chidi's kindness that he's now pushing legislation to fund community transportation centers in rural areas throughout the country. We're talking about a $20 million initiative that could serve 2 million people, all because one young man chose kindness over profit. After the call ends, Miguel sits in his office, staring out at the bustling center that now seems both more significant and more humble than before. His choice in a broken-down taxi didn't just transform his neighborhood, it sparked a movement that's spreading across continents, proving that character recognizes no boundaries, that compassion speaks every language, that humanity is the most universal currency of all. The stories keep coming. A taxi driver in Mumbai who watched Miguel's interview on YouTube and started a similar program in his slum community. A former refugee in Berlin who used Miguel's business model to launch transportation services for other immigrants. A grandmother in rural Kentucky who organized volunteer drivers after learning about the medical transport program, serving elderly residents who couldn't afford ambulances. Each story carries the same DNA, the same fundamental choice between self-interest and service, between profit and people, between the easy path and the right path. And in each case, kindness multiplies exponentially, creating opportunities and transformations that extend far beyond the original act of generosity. Margaret Whitmore calls this the Santos effect during her keynote address at the National Philanthropy Conference, where she presents 5 years of data showing how Miguel's model has been replicated in 43 cities across 6 countries, serving over 200,000 people annually and creating more than 3,000 jobs worldwide. Traditional charity creates dependency,
she explains to the assembled foundation executives and non-profit leaders. But the Santos model creates capacity. It doesn't just solve immediate problems. It builds long-term solutions by investing in character-driven leadership. Miguel Santos proved that when you empower authentic servants, they don't just transform their own communities, they inspire transformation everywhere their influence touches. But perhaps the most profound validation comes not from international recognition or statistical impact, but from a moment that happens on an ordinary Tuesday evening, 4 years after Miguel first refused payment from Harold and Margaret. Miguel is driving home from a community meeting discussing plans for the center's expansion into financial literacy programs when his phone rings. The caller ID shows a number he doesn't recognize, but the voice that greets him is unmistakable. "Miguel, this is Harold Whitmore. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Mr. Whitmore, never a bad time. How can I help you?" Harold's voice carries an emotion Miguel has never heard before, something deeper than professional satisfaction, more personal than philanthropic pride. "Miguel, Margaret and I are calling because we have news. We've decided to restructure our foundation, and we wanted you to be the first to know." Miguel pulls over, sensing the gravity of whatever Harold is about to share. "We're stepping back from day-to-day operations," Harold continues. "After 40 years of philanthropy, we've finally found what we've been searching for all along. Not just successful programs or impressive statistics, but proof that character-based investing can create sustainable, exponential change. Your success and the global movement it's inspired has convinced us that the future of philanthropy lies in identifying and empowering people like you." Margaret's voice joins the call. "Miguel, we're transitioning the foundation to a new model, focused entirely on character-based leadership development, and we want you to head the selection committee, helping us identify the next generation of Miguel Santos in communities around the world." The offer is staggering. Not just a job, but the opportunity to systematize kindness, to create a global network of character-driven leaders, to ensure that the taxi driver test becomes a standard tool for identifying individuals whose hearts align with transformational resources. "We're talking about a $50 million initiative," Harold explains, "with you as the Chief Character Assessment Officer. Your job would be to travel to communities worldwide, identifying local leaders who demonstrate the same authentic service you've shown, people who choose others over self, who see potential where others see problems, who understand that true wealth comes from lifting others up." Miguel thinks about Doña Carmen, now healthy and volunteering at the center's childcare program. About Jerome, who recently opened his own automotive training school. About the hundreds of neighbors whose lives have been transformed by programs that started with a simple choice to refuse payment from desperate strangers. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm honored by your confidence, but I need to ask something important. If I accept this position, if I help you find character-driven leaders in other communities, what guarantee do we have that they won't change once they receive resources? How do we ensure that success doesn't corrupt the very qualities we're trying to reward?" Harold's laughter carries genuine warmth. "Miguel, that question is precisely why you're the right person for this role. Someone who worries about character corruption is someone whose character is incorruptible. We've watched you manage millions of dollars while maintaining the same humility, the same service orientation, the same genuine care for others that you demonstrated in a broken-down taxi." And Margaret adds, "Plus, you understand something most people miss. Character isn't tested by poverty, it's revealed by it. And it's not corrupted by wealth, it's amplified by it. The people we're seeking don't change with circumstances, they just gain the tools to multiply their existing impact." Miguel considers the opportunity, thinking about all the potential Miguel Santos around the world, driving taxis in Lagos, serving coffee in Mumbai, cleaning offices in Berlin, washing dishes in rural Kentucky. All of them one character test away from transforming their communities. "I accept," he says quietly, "but with one condition. The Santos Transportation Center remains my primary responsibility. This community trusted me with their transformation, and I won't abandon them for global opportunities, no matter how significant. We wouldn't expect anything less, Harold responds. In fact, the center will serve as your home base, the proof of concept that validates every selection you make. When potential leaders visit to see character-based development in action, they'll witness firsthand what happens when authentic servants receive adequate resources. 6 months later, Miguel stands in the arrival terminal at Lagos International Airport, preparing to meet Dr. Okonkwo and evaluate candidates for the first International Santos Initiative partnership. His mission: identify individuals whose character mirrors his own, people who choose kindness over profit, service over security, community over comfort. The criteria are deceptively simple. Candidates must demonstrate consistent, selfless service over time, must command genuine respect from their communities, and must pass the ultimate test, a scenario designed to reveal authentic character when faced with a choice between personal need and stranger compassion. Miguel's first candidate is Amara, a young woman who operates a motorcycle taxi in one of Lagos's most challenging neighborhoods. Dr. Okonkwo has spent months observing her behavior, documenting her practice of refusing payment from passengers who can't afford fares, her habit of helping elderly customers with packages, her reputation for safety and dignity in an industry often characterized by exploitation. But documentation isn't enough. Character requires direct observation, authentic testing, the kind of assessment that can only happen when someone faces real choices with real consequences. Miguel understands this because he lived it, because he knows the difference between performed kindness and authentic compassion. The test scenario is carefully crafted. Amara receives a radio call for an emergency pickup, a pregnant woman in labor who needs immediate transport to the hospital. When she arrives, she discovers a family in crisis. The woman's husband explains that they've already spent their savings on prenatal care, that they have no money for transport, that they're terrified of giving birth without medical assistance. Miguel observes from a distance, watching as Amara processes the situation. He sees her glance at her fuel gauge, knowing she's calculating whether she can afford to make the trip without payment. He notices her check her phone, probably reviewing the day's earnings and weighing her own financial needs against the family's desperation. And then he watches as Amara makes her choice. "Get in," she tells them gently. "Some trips are more important than money." During the ride to the hospital, Amara stays calm despite the woman's increasing labor pains, offers reassuring words in 3 languages, and calls ahead to ensure medical staff will be ready upon arrival. She waits throughout the birth, helps with translation between the family and hospital staff, and even uses her own money to purchase baby supplies from the hospital gift shop. When the baby is finally born healthy and safe, the grateful father offers Amara his watch as payment, the only item of value he possesses. She refuses, gently but firmly. "Keep it for your son," she says. "Maybe someday when he's grown, you can tell him about the day strangers helped bring him into the world safely." Miguel knew before the test was complete. Amara possesses the same character that caught Harold's attention, the same instinctive prioritization of human dignity over personal profit, the same ability to see potential rather than problems. She passes the test not because she performed correctly, but because she couldn't perform incorrectly. Authentic character doesn't allow for calculation when humanity is at stake. 3 days later, Miguel sits with Amara and Okonkwo, presenting the same kind of life-changing opportunity that Harold and Margaret once offered him. A full scholarship for business training, resources to build a comprehensive transportation initiative, the backing of an international foundation committed to character-based development. Amara's response mirrors Miguel's own years earlier. Stunned disbelief, followed by careful questions about community impact, about sustainability, about the responsibility that comes with transformational resources. Her concerns focus not on personal benefit, but on community obligation, not on individual advancement, but on collective transformation. "Why me?" she asks, echoing the question Miguel posed in his grandmother's living room. "Because yesterday you chose to help strangers even when helping hurt," Miguel replies, sharing the wisdom he learned from Harold and Margaret. That single choice revealed more about your character than years of interviews could accomplish. The Lagos partnership becomes the template for global expansion. Within 2 years, Miguel has identified and empowered character-driven leaders in 12 countries, each one demonstrating the same fundamental commitment to service over self-interest. A teacher in rural Guatemala who uses his own salary to purchase school supplies. A nurse in Cambodia who operates a free clinic during her off-duty hours. A mechanic in rural Alabama who repairs vehicles for elderly neighbors without charge. Each leader faces the same kind of character assessment that Miguel experienced, scenarios designed to reveal authentic compassion when faced with difficult choices. And each one, upon passing the test, receives the same comprehensive support, education, resources, and the institutional backing necessary to multiply their existing impact exponentially. But the most significant validation of the Santos model comes not from successful program launches or impressive statistics, but from an unexpected phone call Miguel receives during his 3rd year as Chief Character Assessment Officer. "Miguel, this is President Okafor." Miguel recognizes the name immediately. Nigeria's newly elected president, a reform-minded leader who campaigned on promises of grassroots development and community empowerment. "Mr. President, this is an honor. How can I help you?" "Miguel, I'm calling because of what you've helped create here in Lagos. The community transportation initiatives, the job training programs, the small business development projects. They've become models for our national development strategy. I want to propose something unprecedented." Miguel listens with growing excitement as President Okafor outlines a comprehensive partnership between the Santos Foundation and the Nigerian government, a nationwide character-based development initiative that could serve over 10 million people. We're talking about identifying local leaders in every state, people like Amara, who demonstrate authentic service to their communities. We want to provide them with the resources and training necessary to address local challenges through sustainable, community-driven solutions. The proposed investment is staggering, $200 million over 5 years, making it the largest character-based development initiative in history. But more important than the money is the precedent, the recognition by a national government that authentic leadership matters more than credentials, that character creates more sustainable change than imposed solutions. Miguel accepts the partnership, knowing that success in Nigeria will inspire similar initiatives worldwide, that the ripple effects of his choice in a broken-down taxi are still expanding, still touching lives in ways he never imagined possible. 5 years later, the results exceed every projection. The Nigeria Character Leadership Initiative has identified and empowered 847 local leaders across all 36 states, creating over 15,000 jobs, launching more than 2,300 small businesses, and providing essential services to 8.7 million people. Crime rates have dropped in participating communities. Educational outcomes have improved, and economic opportunities have expanded exponentially. But perhaps most significantly, the Nigerian model has inspired similar partnerships in 6 other countries, with governments recognizing that sustainable development requires authentic local leadership, that character-driven individuals create more lasting change than top-down programs managed by outsiders. Miguel now oversees a global network of character assessment specialists, individuals who understand the difference between performed service and authentic compassion, who can identify potential leaders whose hearts align with transformational resources. The Santos Foundation has become the world's leading authority on character-based development, with governments, corporations, and non-profit organizations seeking their expertise in identifying individuals whose integrity matches their vision. But even as the global impact expands, Miguel never forgets the lesson Doña Carmen taught him in their tiny apartment on Riverside Avenue. Transformation begins with seeing the person, not their circumstances. Every candidate he evaluates, every leader he empowers, every community he visits, he approaches with the same fundamental question that guided his original choice. What would kindness do? The answer continues to multiply exponentially, creating opportunities and transformations that extend far beyond the original act of refusing payment from desperate strangers. Because kindness, when properly invested, becomes the most powerful force for change in the world, generating returns that cannot be measured in dollars, but only in lives transformed, communities rebuilt, and hope restored. Today, Miguel Santos is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on character-based development, a man whose single choice in a broken-down taxi has directly impacted over 400,000 lives across 6 continents. But if you were to meet him, you'd find the same humility, the same genuine concern for others, the same instinctive prioritization of service over self-interest that caught Harold Whitmore's attention on that rain-soaked November night. Because true character doesn't change with circumstances, it only grows stronger with opportunity. And somewhere tonight, in a taxi in Mumbai, a bus in Berlin, a motorcycle in Lagos, someone is choosing kindness over profit and changing the world one heart at a time. The story never ends. It just finds new heroes, and perhaps, just perhaps, the next hero is you.